Hello friends, welcome to this introductory session on social reforms. Title of this paper is Making of Indian Nation. This paper is divided into 4 units and each unit talks about development of India as a nation from political, cultural, religious, economical and social dimensions. The era under consideration is around 19th and 20th century. Friends, Unit 1 deals with social reforms and reformers. When I was offered this subject, I was not sure as to how I would convince my audience about importance of social reforms and contribution of social reformers. And suddenly I realized that we recognize value and importance of any subject very quickly if it has direct impact on our personal well-being. So, I decided to start with this aspect and churned my thought process and realized that I was living in the best era when compared with that of my mother or grandmother, and credit of this goes to some of the major reforms that took place in this couple of centuries. Friends, the history of human civilization that is known to us is around 7,000 years old. Oh, such a long period, isn't it? Now, in relation to these 7,000 years of human civilization, 200 years are relatively very short duration. But if we peep into socio-cultural and religious scenario of these centuries, we fail to relate ourselves with our ancestors of that era. I just cannot imagine how women folks during that period, rather I would say till that period, tolerated the injustice that came in form of sati system, child marriage, forbiddance towards education, paramount situation of gender discrimination, parda system, so on and so forth. I cannot imagine myself being discriminated by my parents just because I am a girl child, or not allowing me to get education, getting me married at the age of 4 or even earlier. And if unfortunately I lose my partner, I would be thrown in funeral fire under the name of sati system. The mere thought of any of such situation gives me goosebumps all over my arms. And I realize that it is not a nightmare, but a reality that was faced by a weaker section of the society a couple of centuries ago. And as I said earlier, relief to Indian folks from such a situation is due to socio-religious reforms initiated by visionary Indian reformers. Today we are going to talk about such socio-religious reforms. What do you mean by reform? Friends, reform is not just a change, but it is a change with an objective of improvising existing situation. Let us study some of the definitions of reform. First, to improve someone or something by removing or correcting faults, problems, etc. Or to improve your behavior or habit. The next definition says, make changes in something, especially an institution or practice, in order to improve it. Friends, we realize two common aspects in these definitions. One, reform is a change in existing stage, and second, it is directed towards improvement. Now, let us understand what is meant by social reform. A reform movement is a kind of social movement that aims to make gradual change or change in certain aspects of society rather than rapid or fundamental changes. The next definition says, reform movements are often gradual movements that make subtle changes to particular characteristics of society. Although when a subtle social movement does not work, a radical, aggressive social reform may take place. Social reform also means that a group of people with a common ideology who try together to achieve certain general goals. So, what we understand from these statements is that 1. Social reform is a gradual process. Second, it is a change brought in certain social characteristics or institutions. And thirdly, it requires efforts of certain like-minded reformers. Friends, social reforms cannot be brought in isolation. You need to reform certain institutions or systems in order to reform the society. These elements of social reforms are religious reforms, educational reforms, cultural reforms, demographical reforms, legal reforms, and political reforms. In this session, we are going to talk on socio-religious reforms in India. Friends, before we talk on reform and contribution of reformers like Rajaram Mohan Roy, Dayanand Saraswati, Jyotiba Phule, Dr. Ambedkar and others, we need to probe into the social environment that prevailed in India during 19th century, a period when these reforms were initiated in different parts of our country. Friends, reforms that began in India in early 19th century were part of chain reaction of various reforms that took place in different parts of the world during the same period. Revivalists, especially in 1820 and 30s, saw number of social ills that needed to be fixed. Some of these were slavery, alcoholism, education, women's right, prison condition and social structure as a whole. Let us confine this session on social evils that prevailed in India. Socio-religious environment in India during 19th century. For ages, Indian society has been bogged down by many social evils. The traces of a few can be witnessed even today. Let us discuss some of these social issues on which reforms were focused. First, denial of education. Friends, Indian society considered education to suppressed class in general and women in specific as a social taboo. Women were forbidden to read and write, and the society had a general prejudice against women education. The reason for banning female education was that they should not realize the injustice to which they were exposed, nor should they gain caliber to question this social system or gain competence in applying their skills and fight for their rightful position in the society. Savitribai Phule, Ramabai Ranade, Gaurima are the names of some of the contemporary women activists who especially worked for betterment of women folks through education. It was also evident that right to education was confined to upper class and caste of the society. Masses were deprived of education, which resulted in widespread ignorance, social stigma, poverty and slavery. Lack of education resulted in huge class difference. The next glaring social evil was outcome of conservative education system, that is feudalism and slavery. Untouchability and lack of education was not the only problem with downtrodden class, but they had to also face injustice from landlords and rich upper caste community. Rich farmers, moneylenders and landlords treated poor and landless farmers like slaves. Due to widespread illiteracy, ignorance, social taboos and rigid caste system, suppressing the already suppressed became easy for the feudal class. Bonded labor was the widespread form of slavery in India. Mahatma Jyotiba Phule, in his book Cultivator's Whipcord, has illustrated the pitiable situation of poor farmers in the hands of rich farmers, Brahmins and British. He strongly believed that education was the only solution to most of the social evils in India. He therefore dedicated his life towards betterment of women and untouchables. He once quoted that, "Without education, wisdom was lost. Without wisdom, morals were lost. Without moral, development was lost. Without development, wealth was lost. Without wealth, the Shudras were ruined. So much has happened through lack of education." Next social illness that needed to be fixed was caste system and untouchability. The roots of untouchability in Indian context are to be found in the socio-religious structure and more importantly in the time honored system of social stratification based on caste. The ideology of highness and lowness engendered among the people belonging to various castes has fostered the growth of untouchability. Untouchability therefore has the genesis in the Indian caste system. According to traditional Hindu Varna system, a person is born into one of the four castes based on karma and purity. Those born as Brahmins are priests and teachers, Kshatriyas are rulers and soldiers, Vaishyas are merchants and traders, and Shudras are laborers. Untouchables are literally outcasts. They do not directly figure out in any of the traditional Varna system of Hindu. According to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, untouchables form an entirely new class, that is the fifth Varna apart from the existing four Varnas. Thus, untouchables are not even recognized under the Hindu caste system. However, traditionally persons born in lower castes and classes of persons doing menial jobs, criminals, people suffering from contagious diseases and tribals living outside the so called civilized world were considered as untouchables. Their exclusion from the mainstream society was based on the belief that they are impure and harmful, and it was necessary to ostracize or exclude them from the overall benefit of the society. There were various forms of discriminations being practiced against untouchables in India. Some of them are prohibition from eating with other caste members, prohibition from marrying with other caste members, separate glasses for untouchables in village tea stalls, discriminatory sitting arrangements and separate utensils in restaurants, segregation in sitting and food arrangements in village functions and festivals, prohibition from entering into village temples, prohibition from wearing sandals or holding umbrellas in front of dominant caste members, prohibition from using common village tap, separate burial grounds, no access to village common or public properties and resources like well, ponds, temples, etc. Segregation of untouchable children in schools, bonded labor, face social boycott by dominant castes for refusing to perform their duties. Social reformers like Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, Mahatma Gandhi, Jyotiba Phule played important role in reducing and abolishing the system of untouchability. Friends, India has always been a male dominated society where women not only had secondary position, but were also exposed to social injustice. Let us talk about some of these evils. Child marriage. According to some of the reformers, this system was the root cause of major social evils. According to this system, the right age for marriage for girls was 5 to 7 years and for boys it was 13 to 15 years. In case the girl is not married till the age of 13 to 14, it would become impossible to get her a groom. This system was prevalent in most of the Indian communities all over the nation. Mortality rate was very high as girls gave birth at the age of 12 to 14. There were no modern medical facilities available, and so any complexities during pregnancy and child delivery could not be addressed properly. Since our society is male dominated, boys were allowed to remarry any number of times and at any age group. It was again a common scenario that the age difference between the couple would be 15 to 20 years or even more. So, the girl of 4 to 5 years may get married to a man of 20 to 30 years. Child marriage also led to illiteracy and poverty. A girl who is married at an early age is deprived of opportunities of education and personal growth. The next social evil that followed due to child marriage was widow remarriage. Friends, Indian society even today do not easily accept the concept of widow remarriage. The environment during 19th century was very conservative. Child marriage quite frequently resulted into early widowhood. As mentioned earlier, the vast age difference between bride and groom would result in early death of husband. Unfortunate girls may become widow even before the age of puberty. That is, even before they understand the real meaning of marriage, they would be pushed into the darkness. Life of widows became very miserable as they were not treated as normal human beings. Widow was to give up all comforts, live in isolation. She was not allowed to participate in any functions or festivals, and she had to wear white clothes with shaven head. Her mere appearance was reproached by others as bad omen. She was not allowed to have more than one meal. Eating good food and sweets was considered sinful, and she was not allowed to sleep on bed. If she does so, her husband would fall from heaven. Thus, the life of widow was worse than that of an ascetic. Sati system. Sati system was yet another barbarous social custom followed mainly in northern parts of India. Under this system, widow was burned to ashes on her husband's pyre. Basically, this system was supposed to be a voluntary act by an aggrieved widow to end her life after death of her husband. But there are evidences of widow being forced to commit suicide on the pyre of her husband. I have heard my grandmother say that men used to stand around the pyre with long bamboo sticks, and if the widow tries to escape the twinge of burning sensation, she would be pushed back into the fire by the armed men standing around the fire. Rajaram Mohan Roy, whose efforts led to abolition of this system, had witnessed this inhuman act in his own family. His elder sister-in-law was burned to ashes after death of Rajaram Mohan Roy's brother. The weirdest part of this system was that even the parents of the widow would encourage their daughters to commit suicide. The simple reason behind this was that if the daughter became sati, it would earn social status to parents as well as in-laws. Again, once the widow dies, there would be no claimant to husband's property. Even the widow considered committing suicide a better option than leading a miserable life thereafter. All in all, society considered sati system as an excellent solution for the widow of deceased husband. Reformers strongly stood against this system, especially after being exposed to European culture and education. Bengal Sati Regulation Act was declared in 1829, where burying or burning alive Hindu widows was considered criminal offence. Yet another social evil against which social reformers fought was female infanticide. Friends, in 18th and 19th century, the brutal practice of female infanticide prevailed throughout the country. Female birth was an unaccepted, and all types of efforts were done to get rid of the girl child. Different methods were adapted in different states and communities to kill the girl child. In some community, newborn baby was thrown in boiling hot oil pan or boiling milk, or by oral application of certain locally available herbal juice, or by putting the paddy grain at the throat of a child. In some places, the female child was crushed under one of the legs of the same cot which witnessed her birth. These days, we use modern technology to detect gender of the fetus and straight away disregard female fetus. This was yet another social evil that was addressed by social reformers. Friends, the social evils that we have discussed prevailed more or less in all the parts of India. Apart of this, certain customs like Devdasi, polygamy, polyandry were prominent in some of the states. Under Devdasi system, young girls were married to God and were expected to devote their entire lives in service of God. They were almost donated to the village temple and were expected to entertain people through their dancing and singing. They became easy prey to village priests, landlords and elite men of the village. On one hand, girls led miserable life, and on the other hand, her parents enjoyed social status and respect for donating their girls in service of God. Yet another system prevailed in some parts was polygamy, where men were allowed to marry with more than one woman. One of the eldest women enjoyed the status of wife, whereas the rest became his mistresses. There were some communities where polyandry was practiced. Under this system, when women got married to all the brothers, polyandry was practiced mainly in order to keep the family wealth intact. This family system was miserable for women folks and resulted into jealousy and conflict among brothers. In some of the Indian communities, Kanya Vikraya system was followed. According to this system, a man could marry only if he could pay the amount demanded by the bride's parents. So, the person who pays maximum amount would get married to the girl of his choice. Needless to say that the age difference between them did not matter. In case if the husband dies, the parents would get her married again and earn money for the same. This practice was outcome of imbalance in gender ratio. Yet another social issue to which we have yet not found solution is dowry system. Under this system, even today, parents have to pay ransom to get their girls married. The dowry demanded depends on status, education and income and job profile of the groom. Friends, legal machinery, social activists, reformers are all trying to get rid of this system. But dowry system is so deep rooted that even in this 21st century, we come across regular incidences of dowry deaths. Friends, in our upcoming lectures, we will be talking about contribution of great visionary reformists who dedicated their work to fight with these social evils. Till then, I would be glad if you sensitize yourself to social evils that you see around and think as to how you can contribute to improve this situation and participate in making Indian nation. Thank you.